She was only a cleaning maid, until the Lycan king discovered she was the true heir. The castle of Veyran rose like a dark jewel against the twilight sky. Its towering spires pierced the clouds, and the walls, slick with centuries of rain, whispered secrets that no visitor had ever lived to tell. At the heart of this fortress the Lycan king ruled, a figure of fear and fascination, known for his power over beasts and men alike. Evelyn moved silently through the vast corridors, her small hands clutching a mop. She had long learned the rhythm of the castle, when to step lightly, when to keep her head bowed, when to vanish into shadow. To everyone in the castle she was nothing more than a cleaning maid, one of many who dusted the marble floors and polished the silver candlesticks. But Aveline carried something no one could see, a past buried in silence and a bloodline forgotten by time. Her footsteps echoed faintly on the stone floor as she passed the grand hall where chandeliers hung like frozen stars. She paused for a moment, drawn to a painting of a woman who looked strikingly like her. The resemblance was too close to ignore. Eveline's heart tightened. She had always wondered who her parents were, what had become of them, and why she had grown up in the shadow of a world that seemed to ignore her. "Another night, another mop," she whispered to herself, trying to steady the flutter in her chest. It was a quiet voice, one she had learned to keep gentle so it would not echo beyond the stone walls and draw unwanted attention. From the shadows came a faint rustle. Aveline stiffened. The castle had eyes everywhere, or so it felt. Every corner, every corridor seemed alive with watchful spirits, invisible to the ordinary eye.
She brushed off her fear.
It was nothing, just the wind, she told herself. But then she saw him. Kaelin, the Lycan king. His presence was impossible to ignore. Even in the dim torchlight, he seemed to glow with a dark aura, his broad shoulders cloaked in black velvet, eyes glimmering like molten silver. He moved with a predator's grace, silent but commanding.
Aveline froze, unsure if she should step aside or vanish into the nearest shadow.
The king paused, his gaze sweeping the hall. For a long moment he looked directly at her. Aveline felt a strange pull, a weight of recognition she could not explain. Her heart raced as she lowered her eyes, hoping he would pass by. But Kaelin did not move. He stepped closer, and the torchlight caught something around her neck, a small insignia, almost hidden under her simple dress. It glimmered faintly, as if aware of his presence. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, a mixture of surprise and suspicion crossing his face. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low, melodic, and sharp. Aveline's mouth went dry. I don't know, Your Majesty," she said softly. She instinctively covered the pendant with her fingers. Kaelin reached out and lightly brushed her hand away. The insignia pulsed under his touch, faintly glowing as if it recognized him. His eyes darkened with intensity. "You are not what you seem, are you?" Aveline wanted to deny it. She wanted to say she was just a maid, a shadow in the castle, someone who would never matter. But the words caught in her throat. She had spent her life hiding from secrets she didn't even fully understand, and now, standing before the king, she could no longer pretend. Kaelin studied her silently. "Do you know what this symbol means?" he asked. Aveline shook her head, though a part of her felt a flicker of recognition. The pendant had been hers since childhood, left in her hands with a note she could not read. She had always thought it was a charm, a mere trinket. Now she realized it carried a weight far greater than she had imagined. "Where did you get this?" Kaelin pressed, his gaze piercing. I don't remember," she murmured, her voice trembling. She had been too young, too frightened to question who had given it to her, or why. Kaelin's expression softened for just a heartbeat, then hardened again. "You belong to a bloodline that was thought lost, hidden, protected. And yet, here you are." Aveline swallowed, fear and awe twisting inside her. She had always wondered about her past, but never had she imagined it might be tied to the Lycan king, to a prophecy whispered in the shadows of this very castle. "You will stay in the castle," Kaelin said suddenly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Not as a maid, not as a servant. You will remain under my protection until we understand the truth of who you are.
Aveline's mind raced. Protection?
Or imprisonment. She did not know if she could trust him, but there was no way to refuse. She nodded slowly, her small hands clenched at her sides. For days she wandered the castle under Kaelin's watchful gaze. He did not speak much, but his presence was constant, a silent reminder that her life had changed forever. She cleaned the halls, tended the empty corridors, and felt the eyes of unseen forces watching her. Something had shifted in the castle. Whispers followed her, shadows seemed deeper, and the walls themselves seemed to hum with anticipation. One evening, as the moon rose blood-red over the castle towers, Aveline ventured to the highest balcony, seeking solace in the cool night air. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying scents of pine, rain, and distant fire. She looked out over the cursed forest that stretched endlessly beyond the walls. It was beautiful and terrifying. A world she had never known suddenly felt close, almost within reach. "You should not be here alone," a voice said from the shadows. Aveline turned sharply. Kaelin emerged, silent as the night, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. She had grown used to the quiet tension of his presence, but it still made her pulse quicken. "I wanted to see the forest," she admitted, her voice small. "To feel it. It's alive." Kaelin stepped closer, and the wind seemed to follow him. "Much like you," he said softly. "Alive, but hidden. Powerful yet afraid to trust it." Aveline shivered, unsure whether the chill was from the night air or the intensity in his gaze. She felt herself pulled toward him, yet a part of her held back. She did not know what he truly wanted, to protect her or to see what she might become. "You carry more than you realize," Kaelin continued, his voice low and deliberate. "And the castle senses it, the people sense it, the forest senses it." Aveline felt a chill run down her spine. Her life as a simple maid seemed like a distant memory now. She was no longer invisible, no longer ordinary. Something in her blood, something in her lineage, had been awakened the moment Kaelin laid eyes on her. Before she could respond, a sudden movement caught her attention. A shadow flickered across the balcony, quick and unnatural. She turned, heart racing, but saw nothing. Kaelin's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her. "They are watching," he said. "Always. And now so will those who wish to harm you." Fear and anticipation twisted inside Aveline. She had always felt like an outsider in the world, yet now, standing beside the Lycan king, she realized that her destiny was far greater and far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Kaelin's eyes softened for a moment, though his presence remained commanding. "You will learn. You will survive. And perhaps one day you will understand why you were hidden and why you were brought here, to this moment." Aveline's heart pounded. She did not know if she was ready for the truth, for the weight of her bloodline, for the dangers that awaited her. Yet a small spark of courage flickered within her. She would not run. She would face whatever this castle, this king, and her own destiny demanded. As she looked up at Kaelin, she realized something profound. She was no longer alone. And for the first time in her life, she felt the stirrings of power, of purpose, that had been buried deep within her. The moonlight bathed the castle in silver and crimson. Shadows stretched long across the marble floors, as if the night itself was alive, watching, waiting. Kaelin's voice cut through the night, quiet but resolute. "So, you are the one they feared would return." Aveline's breath caught. She had no words. Fear and wonder collided inside her chest. What did he mean? And what would happen next? The wind whispered through the towers, carrying with it the promise of secrets yet to be revealed. Aveline knew her life had changed forever. The castle, the king, the shadows, they were all calling her. And she could no longer hide. The castle of Veyron seemed different to Aveline now. Every corridor whispered secrets she once ignored. Every shadow seemed to reach for her. The walls, cold and silent, had always felt like home, but now they felt alive. as if they were watching, waiting for her to take her place. She was no longer a simple maid. She carried a name she did not yet know and a bloodline she had not yet understood. Kaelin moved through the castle like a shadow himself. He watched her without speaking, sometimes appearing beside her when she least expected it, sometimes lingering in the halls, silent and commanding.
Aveline felt both frightened and strangely drawn to him.
There was danger in his presence, but also a strange warmth, a sense that she was not entirely alone in this vast haunted fortress. "Stay close," Kaelin said one evening, his silver eyes glinting under torchlight. They were walking through the library, rows of ancient books towering above them. The castle has many eyes. Not all are friendly. I am learning," Aveline whispered, her small hands brushing against the spines of the books. She had always loved stories, even when she had no one to share them with. Now, each book seemed to speak to her, as if the knowledge she had always been denied was waiting to be discovered. Kaelin nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "Good. But learning is only the first step. You must also remember who you are, who you were meant to be." Aveline felt a chill. She had spent years hiding from the truth of her past, from the whispers and shadows that followed her. Now, she could no longer hide. I want to know," she said softly. "I want to understand." Kaelin's expression softened, but only for a moment. "Understanding comes with danger. Are you ready to face it?" Aveline hesitated. Her heart pounded, but she nodded. "I am." The days that followed were filled with lessons and discoveries. Kaelin showed her how to move quietly through the castle, how to sense danger before it arrived, and how to read the subtle signs of people's intentions. Aveline was a quick learner, her instincts sharp, her mind alert. She felt a strange thrill in learning to survive in a world she had once believed she could never belong to. Yet even as she learned, she felt the stirrings of something else, a power within her that she could not explain. Sometimes in the silence of her chambers, shadows would move at her command, bending slightly toward her will. Sometimes the wind seemed to carry messages meant only for her. She did not understand these gifts, and she feared them, yet she could not ignore them. One night, the castle erupted in alarm. A dark figure had been seen near the outer walls, moving like a shadow among the trees. Kaelin appeared at her door, his presence sudden and commanding. "Come with me," he said. Aveline followed him through the winding corridors, her heart pounding. They reached the outer courtyard, where torches cast flickering light on the cobblestones. There, standing among the shadows, was a man cloaked in black, his eyes gleaming with malice. "He knows," Kaelin whispered, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "He knows about you, about the bloodline, and he will not stop until you are gone." Aveline felt a shiver run through her. Fear and adrenaline surged through her veins. "Who is he?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A sorcerer," Kaelin said grimly. "One who believes the throne should be his. He will not tolerate the return of the lost heir. And now, he has found you." The figure moved, shadows swirling around him as if the night itself obeyed his command. Kaelin stepped forward, his presence radiating power. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice like steel. The sorcerer laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling in a storm. "She is weak, a girl hiding in shadows. The throne will be mine, and her bloodline will vanish forever." Aveline's fear ignited something within her, a spark of courage she had never known. She took a step forward, her eyes meeting the sorcerer's, and in that moment, something stirred inside her. The pendant around her neck glowed softly, pulsing with a light that seemed to respond to her heartbeat. Kaelin's eyes widened. "It begins," he said, more to himself than to her. The sorcerer lunged forward, but before he could reach her, shadows erupted from the walls, forming shapes that protected Aveline. The darkness seemed alive, bending to her will, though she had not consciously summoned it. Kaelin fought beside her, his movements precise, powerful, almost like a dance. He moved with a predator's grace, striking the sorcerer's magic aside, deflecting attacks with a force that was both terrifying and beautiful. Aveline felt the rush of adrenaline, the pulse of power in her veins. She did not fully understand it, but she knew that she could not stand by and do nothing. Shadows twisted around her fingers, responding to her fear and determination, creating a barrier that slowed the sorcerer's advance. The battle seemed endless. Magic and shadows collided, sparks flying in the darkness. Kaelin's eyes never left hers, guiding her, protecting her, silently telling her that she was stronger than she realized. Finally, the sorcerer, realizing he could not reach her, retreated into the night, leaving a trail of shadowy mist behind. Kaelin lowered his sword, his chest heaving from exertion, but his eyes remained on Aveline. "You survived," he said, his voice calm but intense, "and so did the power within you." Aveline sank to her knees, trembling. Her heart raced, her mind spinning. She did not understand what had happened, only that she had felt something ancient and powerful awaken inside her. Kaelin knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "This is only the beginning," he said. "You are more than a maid, Aveline. You are the true heir. And with that blood comes responsibility and danger." Aveline looked up at him, her eyes wide.
I don't know if I'm ready."
"You will be," Kaelin said softly, though his tone left no room for argument. "You must be, for your sake and for the kingdom's." In the days that followed, Aveline trained under Kaelin's watchful eyes. He taught her not only how to move through the castle and sense danger, but also how to focus her newfound abilities. Shadows became her allies, whispers in the wind her guides. She began to understand that her bloodline carried more than a claim to the throne. It carried power, ancient and mysterious, that had lain dormant for generations. Yet, the awakening of her power also brought fear. Every night she felt eyes upon her, unseen and watchful. The castle seemed to shift around her, shadows twisting, whispers growing louder. She could not tell friend from foe, and even those who claimed loyalty to the king moved with caution, as if uncertain of her place in this world. Kaelin remained her constant, a presence both protective and demanding. He pushed her, tested her, guided her. But he also looked at her in ways she did not fully understand. His gaze lingered on her in moments of quiet, his words often carrying layers she could not yet decipher. One night under a silver moon, Kaelin brought her to the highest tower, where the wind tore at their cloaks and the stars seemed close enough to touch. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice low. "The power inside you?" Aveline nodded, her hair whipping around her face. "I feel something, but I don't understand it." "You will," Kaelin said. "And when you do, you will see why they feared your return. The kingdom, the throne, your bloodline, it all matters. More than you can imagine." Aveline shivered. She wanted to ask him more, to understand the full truth, but a deep sense of caution stayed her words. The castle, the king, the shadows, they were all part of a world she was only beginning to see, and the danger lurking beyond the walls had only just begun to stir. Suddenly, a distant howl echoed across the forest, sharp and urgent. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, his body tensing. "They are moving," he said, almost to himself. "Something is coming. Something that will test us both." Aveline's heart raced. She had begun to understand that her life had changed forever. She was no longer a simple maid, no longer hidden from the world. She was the true heir, and with that title came not only power but peril, a destiny that could not be ignored. Kaelin turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Tonight," he said softly, "you will see what it means to truly awaken, and you will have to choose. Will you hide, or will you embrace who you are?" Aveline's eyes met his, filled with fear, wonder, and a flicker of courage. She did not know what awaited them, but she knew she could not turn back. She could no longer be the girl who swept the floors unnoticed. The castle, the shadows, the kingdom, they were hers now, in ways she was only beginning to understand. The wind howled louder. carrying with it the promise of danger, mystery, and power. And as the night deepened, Aveline felt a strange pulse in her chest, a call from her bloodline, from the pendant around her neck, from the destiny she could no longer deny. The forest beyond Veran Castle was alive with shadows. Trees twisted like ancient guardians, their branches clawing at the wind. Aveline stood at the edge of the castle grounds, the moonlight spilling over her silver and pale. Her heart raced, not just with fear, but with anticipation. She had survived the first threat, but the whispering shadows told her that more challenges were coming, darker, sharper, more dangerous than anything she had yet faced. Kaelin stood behind her, his presence a protective shadow. His silver eyes scanned the forest, alert and sharp, reflecting the red-tinged moon. He had been quiet for a while, speaking only when necessary. But now, the stillness between them was heavy with unspoken words. "You've changed," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "Since the night of the attack, I see something different in you." Aveline swallowed. I feel it too," she admitted. "Something is stirring inside me. I don't fully understand it yet, but I feel power and fear." Kaelin's gaze softened, though his body remained tense. "Fear is natural. Power can be dangerous if not controlled, but you are stronger than you realize." She looked at him, studying the lines of his face, the strength in his frame, the way he carried himself with the weight of the kingdom on his shoulders. There was something in him that drew her, a mixture of danger and longing, strength and loneliness. She felt a pull she could not explain, a desire to trust him even when the shadows of her past told her not to. "You've never known true fear," Kaelin continued, "until you realize that the people you care about could be taken from you or worse, used against you." Aveline's thoughts went to the sorcerer who had attacked her before. The memory of his shadowy magic, the feeling of helplessness, burned in her mind. "I won't let him, anyone, hurt me again," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. Kaelin stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then you must learn quickly. Your bloodline, it carries power beyond ordinary understanding. It awakens in moments of danger, emotion, and need.
You felt it the night of the attack.
You must learn to control it, or it may control you."
Aveline shivered, both from the cold and from the weight of his words.
She had spent her life hiding, surviving in silence. Now she was being asked to embrace something she did not yet understand, something that could either save her or destroy her. Over the next days, Kaelin trained her, not in weapons, but in control. He taught her to focus her thoughts, to listen to the pulse of the forest, to sense the energy around her. Shadows began to respond to her will, curling around her fingers, following her movements like obedient creatures. Yet the more she learned, the more she realized how little she truly knew. Her powers were unpredictable. Sometimes the shadows moved as she wished. Sometimes they twisted, wild and untamed. She began to understand that her bloodline carried a curse as well as a gift, a power that could protect or destroy everything she held dear. One night, as Aveline practiced in the courtyard, Kaelin watched from the balcony above. The moon bathed her in silver, and the shadows around her danced like living spirits. She extended her hands, and the darkness rose in response, swirling and bending. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she realized she could feel the energy of the entire castle, the forest, even the distant mountains beyond. "You are ready," Kaelin said, his voice carrying down to her. "But readiness is not enough. You must face the truth of your lineage. Only then will you control what lives in your blood." Aveline paused, her eyes meeting his. "What truth?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kaelin's expression darkened. "The prophecy, your ancestors, the curse that binds this kingdom. You are not just the heir. You are the key to breaking the cycle, or continuing it. The choice will be yours." Aveline felt a shiver run through her. She had never imagined her life could be so intertwined with destiny, with magic, with danger. She had survived as a maid in the shadows, But now she stood at the center of a storm she could not yet comprehend. That night the castle was restless. Whispers echoed through the halls. Shadows moved where they should not, and the wind carried a faint scent of smoke. Aveline could feel the pulse of the castle, the heartbeat of the ancient stones, as if the fortress itself was warning her. Suddenly the doors of her chambers burst open. A figure cloaked in darkness slipped inside, silent and menacing. The sorcerer. Aveline's heart leapt. She raised her hands instinctively, and the shadows around her rose like serpents. The sorcerer hissed in surprise, his dark magic clashing against the shadows that obeyed her command. Caelan arrived moments later, his sword gleaming under the moonlight. He moved with precision, cutting through the sorcerer's magic, forcing him back. The courtyard became a battlefield, the night alive with sparks of energy and the sound of clashing power. Aveline felt a surge inside her. The pendant around her neck pulsed with light, responding to the fear, determination, and anger in her heart. Shadows twisted and rose around her, striking at the sorcerer, driving him back. She realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, that the power within her was no longer dormant. It was alive, responding to her emotions, her will, and her courage. Caelan's voice reached her over the roar of magic. "Control it! Focus! Do not let fear guide you." Aveline closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and reached into herself. The shadows obeyed, forming shapes that protected her, pushed the sorcerer back, and created a barrier around the castle. The sorcerer hissed, retreating for the moment, but his eyes burned with promise. This was not the end. After the battle, Caelan helped her to her feet. She was trembling, exhausted, but alive. She looked at him, gratitude and fear mixing in her chest. "You've done well," Caelan said, though his voice carried a weight she could feel. "But this is only the beginning. The prophecy, the curse, it will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Aveline nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. She had survived the attack. She had awakened her power, but the cost was clear. Danger was ever present, and her enemies were patient and cunning. Days passed, and the castle became a place of both training and reflection. Caelan and Aveline spent long hours together, not just in lessons, but in quiet moments of conversation. He learned pieces of his past, the loneliness of power, the burden of a curse that had haunted his family for generations. She felt his pain, his longing, and in small moments, glimpsed the man behind the king. Caelan, in turn, saw her courage, her intelligence, and the strength that lay hidden beneath her quiet exterior. He noticed the flickers of power in her eyes, the determination in her hands, and the way her presence changed the energy of the castle itself. There was a bond forming between them, unspoken yet undeniable. One evening Aveline stood alone on the balcony, the wind tearing at her hair. She felt the pull of her bloodline, the weight of the prophecy, and the stirrings of power that had become a part of her. Caelan joined her silently, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body against the cold night air. "You fear what you are becoming," he said softly. Aveline nodded. "I do. But I also feel alive, strong. I never imagined I could feel this way." Caelan looked out over the forest, his expression unreadable. "Power is a double-edged sword," he said. "It can protect and it can destroy. The choice is always yours. But you must not hesitate when the moment comes." Aveline felt the wind whip around her, carrying whispers of the past, the forest, and the destiny she could no longer ignore. She knew he was right. Hesitation could mean death for her, for the castle, for the kingdom. Suddenly a chilling howl rose from the forest, sharp and urgent. Aveline's heart raced. Shadows moved at the edge of the trees, and she felt the pulse of danger like a drumbeat in her chest. Caelan's hand tightened around hers. "They are coming," he said. His voice was calm, but the tension in his body betrayed the truth. And this time, it will not be a simple test. Aveline looked at him, fear and determination mixing in her eyes. She felt the power within her pulse like a heartbeat, ready to defend, ready to fight. She was no longer a maid in the shadows. She was the true heir, and she would not run. The night was thick with shadow and mist. Veyran Castle stood like a fortress of stone against the rising darkness, but the wind carried whispers of approaching danger. From the edge of the forest, figures moved silently, shapes darker than night, their eyes glowing like embers. Aveline stood on the highest balcony, her hands trembling, the pulse of her bloodline thrumming like a drum in her chest. Kaelin emerged from the shadows behind her, his silver eyes sharp and alert. His hand found hers, steadying her, grounding her in the chaos that surrounded them. "This is it," he said quietly. "The moment your bloodline has prepared for. The moment we have trained for. Are you ready?"
Aveline looked at him, her heart racing.
She had trained, learned, and awakened the powers of her lineage. But this was different. The forest seemed alive with threats, the air thick with magic and malice. She nodded slowly, determination shining through her fear. "I am ready," she said. Kaelin's grip tightened. "Then let us end this together." The Shadow Army advanced, a tide of darkness rolling toward the castle walls. The air shimmered with energy, and the ground vibrated beneath their feet. Aveline extended her hands instinctively, and the shadows around her stirred, rising like living serpents. Her pulse matched theirs, a rhythm of command and protection. Kaelin moved beside her, his sword drawn, his presence a perfect balance of strength and precision. "Do not hold back," he said. "Trust yourself. Trust your power." Aveline inhaled deeply, feeling the energy of her bloodline surge through her. The pennant around her neck glowed brightly, a beacon of light and power. She focused on the shapes of the shadows, bending them with her will to form barriers, shields, and weapons. The army of darkness hit the castle with a wave of force, but the shadows responded, striking back, holding the line. The battle was fierce. Magic clashed against magic, steel against darkness. Kaelin moved with lethal grace, cutting through the creatures with precision, each swing of his sword a dance of power and skill. Aveline followed, learning to trust the connection she had with the castle, the forest, and Kaelin himself. The energy of her bloodline pulsed stronger with every strike, every moment of courage. Then the sorcerer appeared, tall and menacing, his eyes burning with hate. He had summoned the army, but he was not content to watch from the shadows. His magic flared like wildfire, striking at the castle, seeking to destroy everything in its path. Kaelin stepped forward, blocking the attack with a swing of his sword. "Stay close," he shouted, his voice carrying over the roar of battle. "Do not let him separate us." Aveline nodded, fear and determination mingling in her chest. She raised her hands, the shadows twisting and rising to her command. For the first time she understood the full potential of her bloodline, the power to protect, to fight, and to shape the world around her. The sorcerer laughed, dark and bitter. "You think you can defeat me? A girl and a king against the blood of darkness itself? You underestimate her," Kaelin said, his eyes blazing. "She is the heir. She is the power you cannot control." Aveline felt the surge of energy within her, the pulse of her lineage, the connection to the castle and the forest. She extended her arms, and the shadows leapt forward like living swords, striking the sorcerer's magic with precision. The creatures he had summoned faltered, confused and disoriented, as the shadows she commanded protected the castle walls and struck back at the invaders. The sorcerer's eyes widened. "Impossible," he hissed. She is stronger than I thought." Kaelin moved with her, their movements synchronized, a perfect balance of strength and instinct. Together they pushed the darkness back, Aveline shaping the shadows, Kaelin striking with the sword. The battle raged for hours, the night alive with magic, courage, and determination. At the climax, the sorcerer unleashed a torrent of shadow energy, a wave so powerful it threatened to engulf them both. Aveline felt fear rise within her, but Kaelin's hand on hers grounded her. "Focus," he said. "You are the heir. You are the power. Take it." Aveline closed her eyes, drawing on every memory, every lesson, every heartbeat. She reached deep into her bloodline, calling forth the full force of her power. The pendant around her neck blazed like a sun in the night, and the shadows responded, rising into a massive swirling shield of energy. The sorcerer's attack crashed against it, then shattered, leaving him exposed. Kalen moved with speed and precision, striking the sorcerer with a force that sent him flying. The dark magic dissipated into the night, leaving only silence, broken only by the wind and the distant cries of retreating shadows. Evelyn sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Her hands trembled as she felt the pulse of her bloodline slowly settle. Kalen knelt beside her, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You did it," he said quietly. "You are stronger than I ever imagined." Aveline looked up at him, her chest heaving, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and awe in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Kalen's hand brushed her hair from her face, a gentle gesture that sent warmth through her chest. "Yes," he said, "together. But the kingdom, and your bloodline, there is still much to heal, much to protect." Aveline nodded, understanding that her journey was far from over. She had embraced her power, faced her fears, and survived the darkness, but the world beyond the castle walls would always carry new challenges, new threats, and new lessons. Days passed and the castle began to recover. The people, once fearful, began to look at Aveline with awe and respect. They sensed the strength in her, the courage and the power of the true heir. Kalen remained at her side, guiding her, teaching her, and slowly allowing the bond between them to grow. In quiet moments they would walk through the castle gardens, beneath the silver light of the moon, speaking of the past, the future, and the weight of their shared destiny. Aveline learned not only the ways of her power but the ways of the heart: trust, loyalty, courage, and love. One evening, standing on the balcony overlooking the forest, Kalen turned to her. "You have grown stronger," he said, "not just in power, but in spirit. You are ready to embrace who you are, truly." Aveline felt the warmth of his gaze, the strength of his presence, and the quiet intensity of the bond that had grown between them. I am ready," she said softly, "for the kingdom, for the bloodline, and for whatever comes next." Kalen's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "Then we face it together," he said, "no matter what the future holds." The wind swept through the towers, carrying with it the whispers of the past, the spirits of the forest, and the promise of a new dawn. The castle, once shadowed and fearful, now stood as a symbol of hope, courage, and the strength of those who dared to embrace their destiny. Aveline looked toward the horizon, the first light of dawn breaking through the clouds. She had been a maid, hidden in the shadows, unnoticed and alone. Now she was the true heir, a queen in her own right, a wielder of power, and a woman who had faced fear and emerged stronger. Kalen stepped beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "The night has passed," he said, "but the story, ours, is only beginning." Aveline smiled, a mixture of relief, pride, and anticipation shining in her eyes. "Then we write it together," she said. And so, under the first light of a new day, the Lycan king and the true heir of Veyron stood together, their bond forged in shadow, battle, and moonlight. The kingdom was safe, for now. The curse had been faced, the prophecy awakened, and a new era began, a world of power, courage, love, and endless possibility. But even as the sun rose, the shadows lingered, a reminder that darkness always waits, and that those who wield power must always remain vigilant. And for Aveline and Kalen, the journey was far from over. The kingdom, the bloodline, and the future lay before them, full of challenges, choices, and the promise of legend.